All right, all right. Welcome to Sabs podcast, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Sabrinasalvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can find me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And you can find me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And welcome back, guys. I want to start off the show with a special guest. His name is Theo Wilson. He is the former policy advisor to RFK Jr. He's also the host of the History Channel series, I Was There. He's a poet, activist, and an advocate for Black lives and medical freedom. I want to go ahead without further ado and bring him in. What's going on, Theo? Thank you so much for joining me.
It is an honor to be here, Miss Sabby Sabs.
So I think the first question, a lot of us, I'm sure, as you know, we were very excited about RFK Jr.'s campaign in the beginning. It seemed like he had the right message, and we can go down that timeline. But I want to start from the very beginning. Why did you decide to be a part of the campaign? Was it something about RFK Jr. or was it something about his message that really resonated with you? Why did you decide to join that campaign in particular?
RFK Jr. at the time was the only Democrat at the time who saw medical freedom and Black lives as connected issues. And so it was the summer of 2020. It was George Floyd's summer. All sorts of wild stuff was happening at the Colorado State Capitol. And I got pulled into trying to message the idea of medical freedom to a Black audience. As you know, that's a pretty overwhelmingly white audience. And so I knew that forcing needles into the arms of Black people who have lost bodily autonomy as a matter of history is something that is historically triggering. And I could see at the time that if COVID was going the way it was going with the lockdowns, that vaccines were going to be forced too, which, by the way, they told us was conspiracy theory. And on the Capitol steps, this guy with a scratchy voice stepped up and he connected the dots. I spoke that day, and a brother named Del Bigtree from the High Wire had me on. And in short order, Del Bigtree was pulled into RFK Jr.'s campaign, and he said, we got to diversify the advisors around here. And before I knew it, I was on a plane to Hyannisport at the Kennedy compound. That's how it happened.
That is very interesting. Wow. So I think for those who are not aware, there are some of you that are newer to the channel. So I do just want to explain this. In particular, for myself, RFK Jr. made his campaign announcement here in Boston, Massachusetts. Right. I was there on the ground to cover that. I think I may have been one of the only independent media people there, like, to be honest with you, at that point in time. And there was a lot that he said during that campaign that I thought, or at least during that speech, that I thought, okay, this guy has a great message. The only criticism that I had at that point in time is that he was running through the Democratic Party, right? So I don't support the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. So I said, I wonder if he would be willing to move out of that, which he eventually did. And we'll get to that. But what was really interesting to me is that at that point in time, there was a very diverse group that was there. And that's why I was a little bit confused as to, after the announcement, when it came to the appearances, it did seem like it went from this diverse group that was present at his campaign announcement to all of a sudden, this is the pandemic candidate, right? So he started to resonate with mainly with a large crowd that was critical of the lockdowns, et cetera. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it made me wonder, who was he trying to reach? In the very beginning of the campaign, when he was still a part of the Democratic Party, was there a certain group that he was trying to reach? For example, was he trying to reach Biden voters that were disappointed with Joe Biden? Was he trying to reach non-voters? Who do you think he was trying to appeal to in the very beginning?
Absolutely everybody. He was siloed to the right wing. The left wing wouldn't talk to him. That's the best I can tell you. We had connections to CNN, we had connections to MSNBC, but only Fox News, only Newsmax would put him on. And that is because his stances on the vaccines, his stances on medical freedom had him branded as the crazy, kooky anti-vaxxer Bobby Kennedy Jr. They didn't want to hear about how he had economic policies that were extremely populist and sounded a little Bernie-esque, right? His name made him a threat. The fact that when I told my mother who I was working for, she said he got my vote off name recognition alone, because my mother was old enough to have voted for his father before he was assassinated. She was in California for those little primaries. So they feared him on the left. And this meant that there became like a reverberating echo chamber where he was only getting on right-wing media. So this amplified the more right-wing voices within the campaign. He had a coalition of everybody. Dennis Kucinich was on the team. You feel me? There was a lot of people from the left and the right. And in time, because of how we were siloed into the right-wing media ecosphere, those voices began to win out.
So that's really interesting. I did notice that I think he had one appearance on CNN in the beginning, and then they didn't bring him back on. I do remember that.
For sure.
But speaking of media, aside from corporate media, there was also independent media. And I think this is where some people like myself and many of us that are voices on the left, which I consider to be more the true left, we were not a part of that equation. I really would have liked to have seen, and it didn't even have to be me, but I would have liked to have seen RFK Jr. on Katie Halper's show, on The Gray Zone, on he went on to Breaking Points, but Breaking Points has more of a conservative audience for the most part. It seemed like he was not willing to make appearances on those progressive left shows, like Brianna Joy Gray's Bad Faith, for example. She spoke to him on The Hill Rising, but he didn't come onto her show. And I felt like that was a mistake for his campaign, because there was a whole separate coalition of people that I think would have been receptive to at least most of his message. Now, we can get to the Israel-Gaza stuff a little bit.
Okay, let's go, because that's what happened, really.
But it just, to me, it's like he went on to the Jimmy Dore show, but he did not go on to any other left independent media shows. And I want to hear from you, why was that? Was that his decision, or was that the decision of the campaign?
Sabrina, when I first talked to you, I was inside the campaign trying to get him on your show. When I first spoke to you, I know exactly what you're talking about. Forces higher than me compelled him out of the left-wing independent atmosphere. And I really can't call it to this day. But I knew that what I really felt was a real big problem is that if they had to choose who to piss off, if they had to choose who to make angry, they were more comfortable making the left angry than the right. I thought that was a big issue, because numerically speaking, the left is actually bigger than the right. I know it don't seem like it with this past election, but the fact was there's this huge unserved demographic on the left that y'all were reaching out to. And I think that forces higher than me in the campaign stop that from happening. So what I was resorted to do is I was the first one who got him on The Breakfast Club, that first go around in August of 2023. So I was trying to get him on more urban stations like that, but I was trying to book him on yours, and things just pulled him away. And I think that that momentum toward the right had already begun.
So I think what some of us assumed was the Israel issue, because when RFK Jr. was on Jimmy Dore's show, he did commit to having a conversation with Max Blumenthal. It was the statement heard around the world. So we all heard it. We were like, okay, great. He's open to having a conversation with Max, but that conversation never happened. And we had to ask, like, why, out of all the people to run away from, why would you run away from someone who's an investigative journalist who has been to Gaza, who's been to Israel, and hear the other perspective? But then we see RFK Jr. go on to Breaking Points, which they pushed back on him too about that particular issue. So it looked like to us that he just made a decision that he was not interested in trying to appeal to the progressive or socialist left base. And I think, again, that was a mistake, because he could have heard a perspective that maybe could have opened his mind a little bit. I do not know. But I don't understand if he was trying to bring people together, why would you avoid just that one group of people?
Let me tell you, sis, I had it out with him personally over this. And I said to him, and this ain't nothing new. Bobby sees this. He knows it. There was other people in the room. And I said to Bobby, you know that you had the David effect when you challenged Dr. Fauci. I said, right now, Max Blumenthal got the David effect against you. You need to square off with that man. You need to actually go toe to toe with him because, frankly, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the most rhetorically capable Zionist ideologue I've ever met. I've never seen somebody with the amount of nuanced data recall around the pro-Israel side as him. And the only person that I knew that could actually go toe to toe with him like that was Max Blumenthal. I fought to get that going, but rank and file is rank and file. I wasn't high enough, but what I said was, I think he could benefit you. When he went on that show with Shmuley, Rabbi Shmuley, is when the troubles began. And this was before October 7th. I remember this timeline. This was before October 7th. And it seemed like Shmuley was in his ear more than I could be in his ear. It seemed like that contingent was higher up in the rank and file. That's the best I could assess it. Shmuley ended up leaving after his beef with Candace Owens. It was just too destructive. But I remember talking to you. I don't know if you remember this, but I was like, we trying. There was that. So that left-leaning coalition, this was Dennis Kucinich was still there. We were very much advocating for Bobby to come across more nuance. We ain't got to say, I was like, look, man, you ain't got to say from the river to the sea. All right. That's what I would say. Palestine will be free. That's what I would say. But you can at least say, we don't want anybody's children dying. You could at least say a ceasefire is consistent with my stance as a pro-peace candidate. You could at least say, I am interested in having a conversation about what peace can look like in a long-term structured sense once the bombs start falling. I thought that was the most sensible thing. And when that wasn't said, a lot of the left-leaning contingent of Bobby Kennedy's campaign began to fall off. I was tempted to leave, but I realized something. If I do leave, who's speaking up for Palestine from within the campaign? You know what I mean? If all of us leave, then, there's nobody for that perspective. And so I said, Bobby gonna have to fire me, but I'm gonna keep speaking up. But I couldn't override the right-leaning contingent that was more focused on advocating the pro-Israel point of view. I couldn't overcome it. But that was the timeline. So you are right.
Yeah. So was the idea for the campaign to bring together a right coalition and a left coalition and have them meet somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I think that we saw early on that there was pretty much, and I was able to articulate one of the videos because I was one of the faces of the campaign. There's a loud 15% on the right, loud 15% on the left, right? That's 30% of the population. And super woke, so super mega ain't gonna talk to each other, but there's this middle 70%, this practical, conscientious 70% who's willing to hear out the other side. I said, that's your people, Bobby. That's who we should go for. And around this time, to be fair, the Democrats were really obstructing him in, getting into the primaries and trying to have some kind of fair democratic process. At the time, Marianne Williamson was also trying to do the same thing. And that's when the slings and arrows from the Democrats really festered in Bobby's heart in a way that a lot of people don't realize. And it made him emotionally averse to them after a while and began to lean right. But at first he wanted everybody. That has to be made clear. And the left had its role of blocking him from speaking to the left voters.
That's interesting. You brought up the Democratic primary, and that's where I'm going next.
Right.
The reason I left the Democratic Party is because of these types of games that they play, which is they decide who they're going to give a voice to, and they decide who they feel should be there. those of us, a lot of us that are a part of this show, a lot of people in the audience, a lot of us came from the Bernie Sanders movement. So we are very familiar. Yeah. So, we're very familiar what the Democratic Party did to Bernie Sanders. So it wasn't surprising to me that they tried to shut out RFK. They tried to shut out Marianne Williamson, also Dean Phillips, who pretty much had the most sensible response, which was Joe Biden should not run again. He's too old. Like, it's just, very principled, which came into light. Came into light. So I think the question that I have is, going into this process, was RFK aware of what happened to Bernie Sanders in 2016, how the Democratic Party rigged the primary against him? Was he aware of just how cold the Democratic Party can be to those candidates that they feel should not be front and center?
I think he knew intellectually, but he didn't really understand how severe the wall could be. And remember, his last name was supposed to be some kind of golden ticket. I mean, the man is royalty within that establishment. I mean, like, being around Bobby Kennedy is weird because you see that his facial features are on coins and buildings and sculptures. Like holy crap, it's very surreal, right? He's a Kennedy, man, you know, and I think that in his mind that weighed something. I think that in Bobby's mind it was supposed to be like, look, you can do this some those other folks, but they don't have my pedigree, right? At least that's what I think it was. He tried all the legal routes to do it, and if you ask me, that blocking of populist candidates from the populist left within the Democratic Party is the reason why they got their butts whooped, flat out. That butt whooping been coming for a very, very long time, and now I think they should sit down and think about their life as Bobby is ascended to deconstruct the HHS. You know what I mean? So this is one of those things where I see it. I saw it with Bernie. Shoot, what they did to Bernie was the reason why I sat out in 2016. I sat it out. I was hardcore Bernie, bro, all the way because I'm a millennial. I saw that his policies would be I would be the target group that they would affect the most. I don't think Bobby expected that. And it really hurt him. Like, on an emotional, personal level, it stung him. And we can talk more about that, but just getting to know the man, sleepless nights for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for that, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because those of us that were not a part of the campaign, I feel like we watched all this happen. I like it did, like, on a screen. We saw it either on YouTube or we saw it on CNN, and I'm like, oh, they're doing it again. And he was polling very well at that point in time, and even when he left the Democratic Party. So following this timeline, eventually, obviously, the Democratic Party made it almost impossible for RFK and for Marianne Williamson. So he decided to leave the Democratic Party and run as an independent. And I think even more people got behind him at that point, and they said, okay, you tried to do it the right way, or what they perceived to be the right way. And now you're going to do it as an independent. You had no choice. What are you supposed to do?
Right.
And to some of us as an independent, we are looking for you to be independent from both of those systems. So we're looking to see that the candidate is not repeating some of the behaviors of the two-party system. The big one I think that jumped out to people is that RFK Jr. had super PAC. RFK Jr. had, big money coming in. And I think that rubbed some people the wrong way. And then there was the issue of Nicole Shanahan. So, and I want to get your perspective about this. When RFK Jr. Selected Nicole Shanahan to be his running mate, there seemed to be a little bit of a split from RFK supporters. Some people thought it was a great idea, and some people said, oh, no, she's one of the Silicon Valley people. And so some people were not too sure about her. Do you think that Nicole Shanahan was the correct pick for his campaign? And how do you feel about the statement that some people had that she bought her way in?
I had nothing but love for Nicole Shanahan. All my interactions with her were great. I saw her as extremely competent and capable. And while she may have some pluses and minuses other people may have liked, anybody else he would have chosen would have had a mixed bag as well. I didn't think that was the problem. I think that Nicole Shanahan would have been a powerful vice president. She has all the makings of somebody who is a very capable leader. I didn't have a problem with her. There were other things that I heard that, truth be told, after I had my first interaction with her, which was over the phone, I didn't really pay too much attention. Plus, I was knee deep in a whole bunch of other stuff by the time she came on. So we were trying to put out other fires. But Nicole Shanahan wasn't really a large issue within the campaign. From what I could see, she was pretty much beloved by everybody who was left within the campaign.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious about that one. And so even at that point, he was still traveling across the country. He was hosting rallies. From what I saw on video, he had pretty significant turnout. So
Big
people
rally.
were still very excited about him. He was still polling double digits as an independent candidate. And then as time went on, we heard RFK Jr. say that maybe he was interested in running with the Libertarian Party. And I think this also may have rubbed some people the wrong way because we're like, but you're not a libertarian. It was kind of all over the place. And then we noticed also it seemed like his campaign started to go in a different direction. And he continued to promise people that he would have ballot access on all 50 states, which I didn't believe from the jump because I know how hard it can be for an independent candidate for that to happen. But if he would have ran with the Libertarian Party, obviously that would have been doable. What do you think about that? That decision that RFK made when he went to the Libertarian Party convention and did seek the nomination there, and the promise that he made about being on the ballot in all 50 states?
Ballot access was a huge battle within the campaign. It was almost all of the energy that was put into paying people and getting things done. Ballot access was the looming cloud over all of our heads. And, that's something that I felt like RFK did strategically. He does have libertarian leaning viewpoints, obviously. There are things that he has in common with them. But ultimately, that was just about, from what I could see, making sure that he could consolidate enough small parties so that he could have access to all 50 states.
Okay. And I also know the Democratic Party, they continue to try to sue him off the ballot, just as they did Jill Stein and Cornel West and Claudia De La Cruz. They're notorious for doing that. Many of us at that point in time, we said, okay, all of these third party and independent candidates need to pick one person, and they all need to get behind that person. Why do you think that didn't happen?
Israel Gaza. If I could be honest with you, it tore everybody's hearts open. If were somebody who had Zionist leanings, from your perspective, you saw the rise of anti-Semitism from places that you probably never thought that you would see it coming from on the left. At least that's how they interpreted it. If you're pro-Palestine, you see a genocide in 4K. Like, you see it's on TikTok, it's on Instagram, and you cannot for the life of you fathom that somebody could fall on another side of this issue. And it tore the country apart. It tore our hearts apart. And I think that when you look at Cornel West's stance on it, when you look at Jill Stein's stance, Marianne Williams' stance, and then contrast to Bobby's stance on it, it was so hot. It was so right in front. It was so foreground. We couldn't consolidate like that. And let's say there was a coalition that could have, let's say, rallied around Cornel West. There was still such a large group of people around Bobby that it would have split it almost 50-50 if you really look at it from how the votes actually fell between Jill Stein and Bobby. So, yeah, I think that's what did it. If, that's just my perspective.
Yeah, I can see that being the issue. I can see that. So then we move forward, and there's the big announcement from RFK Jr. where he decided that he was going to sort of suspend his campaign. And he announced that if you were in a blue state or a red state and you wanted to support him, that they would try to stay on the ballot there and you could support him in those states. But ultimately what ended up happening is that some of the swing states would not allow him to remove himself from the ballot, of course, because they thought that in its sense would hurt Donald Trump. Donald Trump ended up winning those states anyway, all of the swing states. But RFK Jr. announced that he was going to join with Donald Trump. And this is where I want to hear from you, because we had this conversation on Call-In after this was announced later on that week. And some of the people that called in said that they were RFK supporters and they were not happy about him joining with Donald Trump, that they had no intention to support Donald Trump, that they only wanted to support him. Do you think that was the right idea? And do you support that move that RFK made to suspend his campaign and to join with Donald Trump?
Well, it worked, didn't it? He's where he wanted to be, at least for that suspension. I feel like, in principle, it was the absolute wrong move, and I told him that. I fought him tooth and nail. Behind the scenes, Bobby and I went back and forth for days about this. And one of the things I said was, you built this campaign from the personnel resource list of Children's Health Defense Fund, man. And you have created something that is essentially the hammer of Thor. The hammer of Thor can only be wielded by the worthy. Trump is not worthy. You have the good faith of people, that you are a good man, that you have some kind of moral compass, that your integrity can be found, that there is an ideological through line to the things that you have stood for across your entire career. And Trump is not worthy of you. That's what I said. Trump is not worthy of you. He is somebody who is, I mean, as malignant narcissist, you know what I'm saying, dictator as you can get from my vantage point. And Bobby's perspective was different. Because I told you, let's go back to those thorns that were in his heart. Joe Biden did not get that man's Secret Service until Donald Trump took a bullet to the ear. Joe Biden has a sculpture of Bobby Kennedy's father in his office. He look at it every single day. Robert Kennedy Sr.'s assassination is who justifies Secret Service protection for candidates on the campaign trail past a certain threshold, and Biden wouldn't give it to the man's son. Say what you want, but ain't none of us got a father named Robert Kennedy Sr. That specifically burned Bobby in a special way. Him being royalty of the Democratic Party, having been blocked in every single turn, made it feel like, okay, who is listening to me? Trump advocated Bobby gets Secret Service. After the whole world was shocked by him getting shot or grazed, that's when it happened. And then when he suspended his campaign, they took it back from him. Now, Gavin DeBecker's guys, those security team that he had, they're good, but they pricey. They're bleeding him out, man. And with that, from Bobby's perspective, he had been betrayed by an institution who his family had helped build, and the only people listening to him were the folks on the right. He was losing money left and right. He should have had the dollars that he would have saved if they gave him Secret Service. And from his perspective, I don't agree with it, but I understand. I don't agree with it, but I understand. The reason why I don't agree with it is because y'all gonna see what Trump does. Y'all gonna see what he does. But I get where Bobby felt that way from his seat, the hottest seat that he could live in was his own. So I see it.
So he went to work with Trump's campaign, but at the same time, there were rumblings that he reached out to Kamala Harris's campaign as well, that he had reached out to both campaigns. And I wanted to hear from you if that's necessarily the case. And it's just that Kamala Harris's campaign was not interested.
She did the first, like, once the Democrats knew that they could obstruct and silence the man, she followed suit. Once they knew that they could turn their back to a Kennedy, then Kamala, you know, she turned her nose up at him. He wanted to talk about what it would look like if perhaps there was a way to create policy that served the agendas of their prospective coalitions in a way that could unite them. And he wasn't looking for a job with them necessarily, at least not to my understanding. But so he reached out to Kamala, but when Trump got shot, that resonated with Bobby in a special way. And I think we know why. That is something that is a special kind of wound for him. Like I told people, like they was like, why you at Bobby Kennedy's campaign? I was like, if your uncle and daddy been killed by under suspicious circumstances, you'd be a conspiracy theorist too. You wouldn't trust nothing, right? So they had a moment, man. Him and Trump really had a moment. I mean, called him up and they really chatted, man. They really talked and they really built. And perhaps if Kamala didn't have that wall up, there could have been a similar conversation on the other side. But from his perspective, these folks ain't listening and these folks are. And after a while, emotionally, it was very binary for him. I personally think Trump is going to be a disaster, but it was binary for Bobby.
So this sounds familiar because this reminds me of the conversation that Ice Cube had with Chris Cuomo on CNN. And I don't know if everybody remembers, but Ice Cube said that he reached out to Donald Trump and he reached out to Joe Biden to talk to both sides about his contract for Black America.
Right.
Ice Cube said that one side agreed to meet, which was Donald Trump, and the other side, which was Joe Biden, said, let's talk after I win. Which apparently that never happened anyway. That talk never happened. So it kind of says something about that Biden-Harris administration that they just don't seem to be willing to meet with. I don't know. Like, I don't know. I can't even say but it's just
they feel and exhibit their elitist ideals time and time again when somebody from the grassroots who might speak for the people, because there was a part of Bobby that definitely was populist, and they decided that they knew better. And now they got sat on their pockets. I hope that the donor class of the Democratic Party, I hope that everybody who is the kingmakers, the ones who feel like they know better than the people and the populists, really take a look in the mirror and examine themselves, because they earned this and they've been earning it for a long, long time. And so this is what they get. And of course, democracy will suffer. And of course, our precious, valuable institutions will suffer. Of course, people of color, minority folks will suffer. But it's not just that good men fail and it creates evil men winning. It's the fact that they'll do the wrong thing sometimes. It's not that they won't, it's not that they'll do nothing. It's that they'll fumble the ball. And they fumble the ball off of arrogance. And I hope that they are humbled by this. Because there was a lot of red flags that the Democratic Party missed. And I think that this was primarily not Trump winning, but them losing.
That's an interesting point that you bring up there, because were you surprised on election night that Trump won every swing state?
I didn't think it was going to be like that. I you know, I thought she was going to get at least, Pennsylvania. Because I knew some folks who was really, really working in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. I thought you were going to at least get that one. But the facts are the facts. When you look at who didn't show up, and they did a comparison between who showed up in 2020 for Biden and who did not show up in 2024 for Harris, and it was young people.
Yep.
What do the young people care about? The young people care about Gaza. Young people care about being able to live. Everybody, I was like, look, man, it boils down to, can I afford groceries and are we going to World War III? You can stop that. You got to vote. Young people got the longest to be on this planet, man. They got the longest to be on this planet. Whatever's happening today, they will live with the fallout for the most extended period of time. Listen to them. And, you know, Kamala Harris sat there and acted as if there's nothing that she could do to stop these babies from dying. Sat there and acted like there was nothing she could do to stop innocent people from being mutilated by fire. Nothing you could do. If I say ceasefire, don't nothing happen. If Sabby says ceasefire, don't nothing happen. If Kamala Harris says ceasefire, the ship with the weapons stops in the middle of the ocean and comes back to our shoreline. And those bombs do not get delivered to Benjamin Netanyahu and the IDF, and people do not die. Period. That's what the young people cared about. And I told my good brother Robert, you need to be speaking at all these college campuses that are having these protests right now. I think your daddy would be there. Speaking up for the young folks, trying to get blood to stop being shed, innocent blood. And it was nothing to say, I believe, like hypothetically, you can say something like, I believe Israel has the right to exist, but so do the Palestinians. And October 7th was a horrific incident, but you do not repay blood with blood. I believe Israel's better than that. And until we have a ceasefire, we cannot stand on the moral high ground earned by us or something like that. Just say that. I wrote it out. Say something like that, right? And go to these kids and say, I care that the police are beating you up. Go to these children and say, I care that you feel like the world is unstable for you. You literally, and I promise to God, in December, we had to do fundraising. And there were so many people that we called that said, man, I love Bobby. I love her. Everything he talks about with the economy, everything he talks about justice. What's up with this Gaza situation? I can't donate. And that's what happened. And like I said, Bobby, see this? We already had this conversation. I ain't saying nothing to you that I have not said to him. And even to the point I was like, can we at least get the debate going with Max? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, can we have that? Like, just to show good faith to those who care deeply about this. People are crying. I was crying every day about that, yo. And I don't really cry like that. You know what I'm saying? Where I'm from, we don't cry like that. But I'm a father and I cry like that over this. You know what I'm saying? It ripped my heart out. And it ripped the heart of the kids out. And they said, if you would allow this to happen to me, I may not show up for you. Yep. And all them college towns in the swing states, them kids stay home.
This is true. Why didn't he go to any of the campus protests to talk to? Why didn't he even at least show up?
We tried to arrange it. My memory is a little sketchy around this one, but I remember something about we tried to arrange that. There was people within the campaign who was trying to bring in more balance to talk to the pro-Palestine side. But ultimately, there was kind of a fear that he would say even more things that would be upsetting to the kids if he had. And, to Bobby's credit, if he don't feel it, he won't say it. If he is not convinced of something, he will not say the thing. And we could not convince him of the things that we wanted said that we knew would bring the kids in and see him as the candidate that they needed. And so I think ultimately it was decided that would not be the most productive route, simply because of how he actually felt about the issue. And, there was, like I said, myself included, very, very pro ceasefire within the campaign, but we didn't have the weight. We just didn't have the weight.
Speaking of weight, does he understand the weight of some of his words? For example, and I go back to the Breaking Point appearance. He was on Breaking Points, and one of the most famous quotes that a lot of us remember, he said that Palestinians are the most pampered people in the world.
He regretted
After that interview, did he not have any understanding of what that said to people and what that meant?
Man, listen, you cannot be from the American royal family and call somebody else pampered. That just don't sound like you are self-aware. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where he definitely knew that he said the wrong thing. He definitely knew that he had stepped over the line with that. I think there were people advising him to say certain things that were from the extreme, even extreme for the Zionist perspective, that really cut him off from that group of folks who could have voted for him for that issue. You know what I mean? And with that being said, it was really, really difficult for him to come back from that. But I know that he wished he did not say that for a fact.
Well, now he has been given an appointment, and I want to get your take on this. This was announced earlier today, or actually late yesterday. It says that Donald Trump picks Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to be his Department of Health and Human Services secretary. Now, some people in Congress are already, I'm sure you heard, are really pushing back on this. They do not want him in this position. But if I remember correctly, I believe this is what he would have wanted being a part of that Trump campaign. How do you feel about that? Do you think that is a good position for him? And how do you feel about some of the congressmen and women that have spoken out that said, no, we can't have him in that position?
Listen, if all you know of Robert Kennedy is Mr. Brainworm, Mr. Anti-Vaxxer, Miss I put a dead bear in Central Park, if that's all you know, you don't want him you don't want him nowhere near that stuff. But if you know him as the lawyer, the guy who has sued these organizations up and down, if you know what Bobby has sacrificed to fight for the little guy his entire career, and if you understand that his knowledge of the conflict of interest within the regulatory bodies that are supposed to protect us and these drug manufacturers are the things that are actually killing Americans, you wouldn't actually want anybody else in that role. So if you think he's crazy brainworm man with the dead bear and the anti-vax, I understand why you're scared. But that's a straw man. That is a straw man, and that's a straw man that we were fighting the entire time. I get that you would be afraid if that's who you thought was in charge of that department. However, when you understand that the same regulatory failures that gave us the opioid crisis was the same regulatory environment that we mandated vaccines into, if you understand that Pfizer lost the Bextra lawsuit in 2009 to the $2 and $3 billion, and that they had no business having carte blanche with the vaccines that were mandated into our arms, and that's by anybody's common sense understanding, then you want somebody like Robert F. Kennedy to stop that from happening again, to strengthen the regulatory agencies and make sure that there was some accountability at the highest levels. That's what he really cares about. So once you see past the straw man, you understand that it's probably Trump's best pick. Everybody else is the clown car, but that's Trump's best pick per assignment so far.
It's interesting. Everybody's calling him clown car. So I have two more questions for you, Theo. So you said that the way the Democratic Party treated him really, I guess, got to him. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I saw Robert suffer at a personal level. When you talk about history and the Kennedy's place in it, it's really interesting. Like when you go to Hyannisport and you kick it with him in the actual Kennedy establishment, what we call historical figures were people around his Thanksgiving and Christmas table. See, it's different for him. And the party that they built, I mean, I'm talking about I didn't know how many generations of Kennedy have been involved in building the Democratic Party. Like since they came over from Ireland, right? They've been involved in the Democratic Party. So he was blood and guts Democrat. It wasn't just the fact that he felt betrayed by an organization. It's that the organization that his family helped build betrayed him. That's how he felt about it. And it was an entire, Bobby's 70 years old. It's an entire lifetime of allegiance to this organization that he is at conflict with now. And that's what happened.
Yeah, I can see that. Also, there were multiple interviews that, of course, CNN really, they really went to town with this one, reaching out to his family members and interviewing them. And of course, they were not in agreement with his run at all.
I mean,
again,
but you got to remember, the Kennedy family is huge. Every time, if you went to a real event with him, there's Kennedys all around, Shrivers all around. And you know it's them because they all got that same face. They all got that same historic face. Even the kids got that face. So there was Kennedys all around. That's just a big family.
Yeah, that's true. But they would pick out the ones that they knew didn't agree with it. But it's funny because Biden ended up dropping out anyway. So that's a whole nother conversation. But the last question I had for you is if there was anything that you could do differently for this campaign, looking back on things, what would you have done differently?
I would have done what I intended to do. I came up with a strategy called sweep the leg. I laid this out to him in Hyannisport. I said, the leg that the Democratic Party stands on is the black vote. I can tell you exactly what they're talking about. The black vote is talking about reparations. The black vote is talking about being able to feed their kids. They want something tangible and they want it now and they're not going to wait. They have saved the Democratic Party many times and now they're looking for issues that are specific to them. I said, you can sweep the leg. If you go on urban media right now, so I was trying to get him like literally all over World Star. I got him on Charlemagne the Guy. We got him, some of my team booked him on Vlad TV. You know what I'm saying? Angela Stan King joined. Shout out to Angela. You know what I'm saying? So there was a lot of people that was trying to get him in front of black voters. I wrote the plan, targeted community repair. And what my language was is that a community that's targeted for destruction must be targeted for repair. It's like if you have a broken bone, the body is better when that bone is healed, but you must target that bone to heal it. So targeted community repair was one of them things that became a lightning rod. But I still think that they were too concerned about pissing off the right and not concerned enough about pissing off black voters. The next thing is when Israel Palestine came, I get the knee-jerk reaction to say what he said at the beginning of the conflict. But I truly believe if by November of last year, Bobby had been the ceasefire candidate and stood 10 toes down on that, he'd be the president of the United States. And the reason is he wasn't running against 1992 Bill Clinton. He wasn't running against 1980 Ronald Reagan and 2008 Barack Obama. He was running against two duds, two of the least popular presidential candidates ever. The man already got the last name. If he had captured that wind, number one, he'd have captured the votes, and number two, he'd have captured that money. When we was doing the fundraising calls, so many people said that Israel-Gaza was the deal breaker. I fully believe that Kamala Harris not putting distance between herself and Joe Biden. She was asked flat out, how will you be different from Joe Biden? She said, I ain't going to be different from Joe Biden. The kids heard that. Dearborn, Michigan heard that. Everybody who cares about, you know what I'm saying, our link between Black America and Palestinians, the Ta-Nehisi Coates gang, they heard that. And so that was the albatross that weighed both of them down. And I believe that if Bobby would have captured that wind, he'd have rode it right to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. That's my honest belief. And I think that history will prove us right.
Theo, thank you so much. What are you up to now? If you want to let people know where they can follow you.
Man, listen, I'm at Theo E.J. Wilson Instagram. And right now, I'm working in the climate space. I found a great passion figuring out how to restore wetlands and ocean pastures. I'm really obsessed right now. I mean, there's something that me and Bobby got in common. I'm from an environmentally polluted neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? I grew up near where that toxic waste was and that dog food factory, and we had jet fuel import on us because we was near the airport. That's where my hood is from. So I'm working in the environmental space right now. I just got a second wind about that. And stay writing because I'm a poet and a songwriter. So that's where my creative juices are flowing, and that's where a lot of opportunities are going. You know what I mean?
Awesome. Theo, thank you so much for your time. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.